Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In our time and the times that we are living in, there is a compilation in the Urdu language that just advises us and just gives us that hope. And it tells us, Kabhi Mayoos Hona, don't become despondent. It's not the time nor the place. Ummeedon ke samandar mein, there is an entire ocean of hope. Why is it that we need to be despondent for anything of that sort? A person in this journey that he's going, it's tiring. Musafir tood jate hai. That even the travelers at times want to just pack up. But the sailor, he powers on and he carries on, and the sailor persists in the journey. And that way, if the sailor is the one that is steering the ship is firm, the entire ship will reach its destination. We are the sailors of the ship of Islam. We are the sailors of our family. Let us never lose hope and let us never become despondent in this time. Thereafter, the poet goes on to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing us. Allah is aware of what's happening. Every condition that is around us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see us. Musibat ke andhero mein, in the darkness and the very, in that when you're feeling down and depressed, in that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look after you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see you. And then He just uplifts the spirit and He says, Kabhi tum maang karke dekho, beg Allah, open your bowls in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let those pearls trickle from your eyes, let it settle down on your cheek and see how in that instance of your tearing and your communication and your speaking to Allah, automatically that despondency becomes one of hope, one of joy and one of resilience once again. No matter how much the wind is against the ship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not make a person go back. Allah will make the person go forward in whatever is happening. Remember, when you see what is transpiring, when you see what's happening around you, do not ever lose hope in what they call the mill of justice. Insaf ki chakki, the mill of justice. In the mill of justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no rush. It takes a bit of time. But when it gives justice, then it makes it very, very fine. A mill, a hand mill, it takes whatever you put into it and it refines it. The mill of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very finely, it makes sure that the justice is given how it is most best. Remember, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for one thing that you will do for Allah, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you 70 in return. Don't ever lose hope in that mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And amazingly, the poet goes on to say that those that pick up their hands and brag in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, never is that hand given back without anything. Allah always gives you better than He gives you when you need it the most. Yes, there will be a little bit of a delay, because Allah doesn't give immediately, Allah gives when it is best, but Allah will give you without a doubt. Remember, sometimes the poet goes on to give an example of clothing, and sometimes when there's a small break in the material and the clothing that you do, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stitches it with the mercy of Allah. It might not be a physical stitch, but the metaphorical stitch that Allah will look after you even when you are broken and downtrodden is something you should never lose hope in. Sometimes the bowl that you beg in will break, but Allah will fix it again with His mercy. And then the poet says two amazing examples he gives. One, he says that for Ayyub alayhi salam, Allah made an entire well come out, which was the cure of him. And in the belly of the whale, Yunus alayhi salam made the dhikr of Allah, and Allah gave him safety from that. Immaterial of what your circumstances is, Allah will look after you. Allah will open up a way from you. Do not ever lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the hurt that you're feeling in your heart, in the darkness that you're going through, Allah will never let the darkness ever envelope you. Allah will never let the darkness be a perpetuating darkness. There'll always be light at the end of the tunnel, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you light as you come along. remember that when the desert is very dry and the tricklets of water come on the desert, how the desert just drinks that water with so much of thirst. When the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come, you find your body will be so enveloped with that mercy, you will feel saturated. When the rain of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you a garden of hope, and Allah will give you a garden of wishes, and Allah will bless you. We just have to ensure that we are always looking and our gaze is fixated on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The mercy of Allah is like the ocean. As the ocean is never ending, so is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, when the darkness envelopes the entire world, then that at the dawn break, when that one flicker of light comes from the sun, how everything just slowly begins to disperse. When the mercy of Allah will come, and it will happen very soon, you will see that mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that light shining in your life. At times, just go down in sajda and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy will envelope you with the greatest amount of mercy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove this darkness that is enveloping us. May He make the light shine amongst us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring better conditions for one and all.